black leaders always dying. There's always some sellouts. I don't care how much muscles you got. I don't care what kind of gun you can pop. None of that matters if you can't think. It's what constitutes reality. So if they can see it in their mind's eye, then they're going to work and live, and they're going to speak a reality into existence. First of all, thank you for having me here. I think this platform is important. And I love what y'all doing here. And I'm thinking, putting myself in your shoes, or let's just say how I would do it per se. You have to engage with people at their level, number one, and then give them the tools to speak about things at a higher level. You understand me? And so one of the things, let's say Google doing this thing where they have philosophy CEOs, you know what I mean? And so let's say every time you come into a meeting, you're asking a philosophical question, not a direct question. And the reason why you don't ask direct questions is because people's guard tend to go up, right? And so the thing that I do in high level conversations, what I do is I am actually trying to provoke a response without asking a question. This is called solicitation, right? So if I'm sitting down with a student, I'm gonna tell them my philosophy about basketball, you know what I mean, or about life. Right? And that's going to provoke their response to want to share theirs. But if I ask them directly, right, that first mind goes up and they start thinking, and that thinking gets frustrated because it's really supposed to be flowing. Mm. When you start thinking, right, that's when you get caught up and you don't know what to say and you get this anxiety. But when they don't even feel like they asking, getting a question asked, and they feel like they're in a conversation, right, now they flowing. You understand me? So I think it's more so just about the manner in which you go about it, and, you know, getting them to understand that the most valuable thing is not particularly like the basketball game or this, that, and the third, but there's other things that'll make you valuable. Mm-hmm. You feel me? The reason we want to know the basketball stats and football stats or whatever else, because it's valuable in conversation. So if it's valuable in conversation, that means I can have better relationships, more social connections, I get rewarded for it. You feel me? So if talking about education and philosophy in the future is not valuable in the way that I see a social reward to it, then I'm not going to learn that, or I'm not going to build that up. So if they get a clip where it goes viral because it's a young child talking about a certain subject you don't normally see young children talk about, and it goes viral, then everybody else want to be like that as well. So children, man, you gotta run a psyop on kids. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? You got to, because, you know, they operate and do things off two reasons: punishment or reward. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If I do this, will I be punished? Or if I do this, will I be rewarded? And that makes them take action or go against something else.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And when it comes down, you know, the name of the show is called How to Beat the Streets. So when it comes down to shifting your mentality, what is something that we can do to help young people shift their mentality from, you know, I'm working with students right now that's back and forth being incarcerated. I'm working with students who don't have fathers in the home. I'm working with students who just aren't invested in being educated. So what can we do to help young people shift their mindset to positivity, thinking forward, education, and things like that?
It's something called strategic imagination. You know what I mean? The strategic imagination essentially is getting children to think like a futurist. You know what I mean? To think of a different reality, right? And so let's say if you watch Black Panther, that was strategic imagination. All Black people watched that and they went to go watch it 3-4 times afterwards. Yes. Right? Same thing with Sinners. They had to watch it a few times because what happened is you went into the past and it reframed the narrative that's in your head. Every student has a story about who they are, whether they're a victim or a victor, whether something happening to them or happening for them, right? Or whether they're going somewhere or they loop in the past, right? Or they becoming a statistic or they becoming an anomaly. You understand me? And so the goal is, how do you get that child, right, to save themselves so where they become the hero in their own story? Mm-hmm. All the time I like to do exercises and getting them thinking about the future a lot. Okay. You understand me? Futurism is the key to unlocking imagination for the whole culture, right? When you look at it like this, culture is consciousness in motion, meaning that it's complexity. So it's the music we listen to, it's the food we eat, right? It's the environments we go to, it's our spirituality, our economics, our media, etc. Depending on Whether those things are high level or low level, you can say whether the culture is high level or low level, right? A score between all of those. But same thing with an individual. If you listen to that child and you go through, right, each one of those categories, then you can see that, okay, this child currently has a low level of consciousness based on this complexity of things that make them who they are and their identity. Then you go look at, okay, what is the core memory that these children have, right? Core memories shape our identity. As a culture, we say, what's the core memories of the culture? Meaning that what are the things that we all know, that we all have in our memory? Typically going to be trauma. You know what I mean? It's going to be black leaders always dying. There's always some sellouts. Black Wall Street never worked. It's like all this traumatic memory. You can't build a future off trauma. You know what I mean? So when you have media and storytelling, you get to go back and re-narrate what that story was. So if I'm talking about slavery, I'm never teaching it from a traumatic standpoint. I'm teaching it from the fact that, wait a minute, as early as you go back, there was always revolts, right? When they was bringing in slaves from the Congo, they was bringing in warriors who they stole from a civil war, who had knowledge of medicine, spirituality, and warfare, right? So they came over with their own practice. They even knew how to grow agriculture, so they created freedmen. You know what I mean? And then you get the maroon people. So there was free people the whole time. Then you go through the Seminole Wars. Blacks and Native Americans, they was fighting the whole entire time. You know what I mean? The war didn't end 4 years before 1865. So what that means, you don't come from slaves, you come from warriors. Right? There's brothers that you can go through in the Mississippi. There was one named Prince. He came from the Congo. He was actually a prince, but they accidentally sold him into the slave trade.
Crazy.
You feel me? So he came over here. He was like, I'm a prince. And they start laughing. They was like, yeah, we're going to call you Prince. But he spoke like 8 languages, right? And he had knowledge of agriculture. So he was actually able to help the farm he lived at. And that was one of the things that allowed him to eventually get to his freedom. So when people say, yo, I come from royalty, well, you might, right? And so reframing that past narrative to where you don't feel like a victim is very important. You understand me? And so strategic imagination is getting the child to change the narrative of what's going on in their environment, right? And then exercises of the future in their imagination. You feel me? One thing I ask children and I ask adults the same question: what's your favorite memory of the future?
Oh, that's a good one.
You know what I mean? Because it forces you to think. It forces you to project yourself. So now I'm not thinking about dying if I got a future. You know what I mean? And so we become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We got a reticular activation system. It's our brain system of recognizing things that we think about. You think about a red car, you recognize it, and you end up, you understand me, in a red car, getting a red car. You think about death, you recognize it, you see it, you magnify it, because our brains have been built for survival. So therefore, we always noticing negative because we're watching out for things that could actually be, painful to us. So those are getting children out that survival mode, is getting them to think about the future. Always talking about the future, projecting themselves in the future. You understand me? So now they're not trying to survive the hood. Your goal is to evolve beyond the hood. You understand me? And so we know the streets is a mentality. If you still have the street mentality, you take it everywhere you go.
Right.
You understand me? And so if you can get them to think of a different mentality, to project themselves in a different reality, then all of a sudden they see themselves as something more. And the moment they see themselves as something more, it becomes a belief. And then that belief is what constitutes reality. So if they can see it in their mind's eye, then they're going to work and live, and they're going to speak a reality into existence. So it is something that you have to do. And I say you got to run a psychological operation on children. I mean that. You feel me? And then you have to tell them all of it is preparation, right? None of it is protection. Fear doesn't work as well as positive reinforcement, right? You can tell somebody what they're doing is whack, or you can tell them what they're doing right.
Right.
You understand me? Positive reinforcement works way stronger. You understand me? So when I'm talking to children, I want to connect with you on things that I honestly believe are great about you.
Right.
And every child and every person in the hood, no matter where you come from, we all have something that's very powerful. I was talking to my brother, Mr. Grateful, about this, and that's perspective. When I was younger, I used to think about what would make me valuable to a billionaire, right? And I would say, no matter what, any room I walk into, my perspective is what makes me valuable. It's the one thing they can't buy. It's the one thing they don't have. They don't have the way I view things, the way I see things, my experience, my exposure. You understand me? And so that child that's sitting there next to you, what you're trying to do is to get them to refine their perspective. You understand me? So when somebody's listening to them, they want the signature of who they are amongst the whole world. No, I like the way you said it. I like the way you see it. And getting them to know that that is the minimum level of value, that you can walk around this whole entire planet Earth and always have a perspective that brings value into the room.
I hope y'all heard that, man. I appreciate, every word. And my last question for you today is, what's 3 things young men growing up without a father should do before it's too late?
3 things young men growing up without a father should do. I say number 1, seek a mentor. Don't use yourself as a guide, because then you got to make every mistake yourself.
Yep.
And some mistakes, they're so expensive, you know what I mean? They put you in a debt that you can't pay. And that's why there's a lot of people in a grave and there's a lot of people in a jail cell.
Yep.
And so discipline is when you become a disciple of something, whether it's information or a person. If I follow what you do and I take on your disciplines, I can become just like you.
Right.
Young men, we learn through observation. You know what I mean? Less through words. We watch what a man does versus what he says. And then that's how we grade what type of man he is. You know what I mean? So as a young man, if you don't have a father, find a mentor, right? If he's absent, find the type of man you want to look up to, right? See how they walk, see how they operate, how they do business, how they speak to people, how they deal with women. You understand me? Find those principles and see if you can live by those. And then secondly, speaking of principles, refine what your principles are. Every man should walk around knowing what his core values are, because that is what he lives his life by.
Yep.
No matter what's going on, I'm living my life by these principles. You understand me? No matter how much money I got, no matter what pain I'm going through, if I said I'm going to live by honor, then I have to do everything honorable, right? It don't matter what's happening in the world, don't matter what's happening to me. I am never going against my principles, ever. And then the last one is learn. You know what I mean? A man is nothing if he does not learn. A man, masculinity is intellect. You know what I mean? The way that they made men stupid is because they made us to think being smart, you know what I mean, was soft. They made us think utilizing your brain and your mind was soft. It is the most masculine thing on the planet Earth is intellect.
Facts.
I don't care how much muscles you got. I don't care what kind of gun you can pop. None of that matters if you can't think, right? And so conflict resolution, we crash out because it's feminine, not because it's masculine, because you don't know how to deal with your emotions. You so emotional, you ready to shoot somebody.
Yep.
Right? If you a man, you can think your way through something. You think your way through it. You feel me? And then that logic brings everything to order, brings it to a point. Universe is, at the beginning, it's feminine. It's potential. It's just potential energy. It's emotions everywhere. It's masculine when it's in order. Second law of the universe is order. A man got to put his life in order. He ordered his steps, he ordered his routines, he ordered his systems, he ordered his principles. And he lived by that. And he starts to be able to make progress in life. Therefore, he knows he's successful. You understand me? So I would say, set up those principles, learn, and have a mentor, right? And you always have a guide for life so you can never be lost. Because you can always remind yourself of who you are based on those principles and values.
I hope y'all listening. Brother 19 Keys, I want to say thank you for stopping by. I appreciate all the work you're doing in the community as a whole, man. And it's been motivational just watching you online. And it's kind of like, destiny that we end up having this conversation on how to beat the streets, man. So appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you. Yes, sir.